right, school is out. The Patriots offseason is over. Minicamp has been cut short for, I think, the first time in the Bill Belichick era, if not definitely years. He's thrown out the OTA schedule for next week. He's fired up his boat, 72 or 52 rings or whatever it's called. And we are putting on episode number 10 of Pat's Interference. Couple of firsts today. Traditionally, I have an intro. Then we go into a guest. Then we close out with a mailbag. I'll be honest, I do not have the energy or the focus working on 3.5 hours of sleep for any of that. So we have brought on Jeff Howe as the first time guest to return to the podcast and the first time supervisor / guest for me here today, because I'm groggy. A few thousand words in Patriots practice yesterday, and it was incredibly fortunate and grateful to cover the Celtics in Game 3 last night and come home with a win. So the price was sleep, and I paid it. And now baby Jeff will pay his own price for giving me some time and carrying the load here. So how are you, bud?
Doing great, man. Go take a nap. We'll get this thing going from over here.
But anyway, Bill Belichick cancels practice. Like I mentioned, you've covered the team since what, 09 or 010?
Yeah, 09.
010. Do you hear me already going like that? And there goes my phone.
I would say 010 too. That's perfectly fine.
Here we go. So yeah, first time reward for a strong offseason, as you put it. OTAs being canceled after minicamp is not necessarily new, but anything there stand out to you? I mean, obviously being kind of the first time they canceled a real substantial mandatory practice.
No, I mean, I've heard for months now that they're really happy with the way that the players have been working. You know, a lot of dedication, and the team has been largely healthy. I mean, a few bumps and bruises. James White obviously still coming back from his surgery, but you know, their attendance during the voluntary portion of it, aside from basically Isaiah Wynn and Matt Judon from sitting out of the voluntary stuff, has been pretty strong. And they're happy with the progress that they've made. So, Belichick he's done this before. I can't remember if he's done minicamp, the finale of minicamp at all. But, as you mentioned, he's canceled some OTAs in the past. But this is a pretty long stretch. So I think he's kind of rewarding the players and telling them, hey, we'll see you in training camp.
Yeah. And I'll see you in Nantucket, where he'll be presumably for the next 4 or 5 weeks, which, if you had to be 4 or 5 weeks somewhere in July, New England in late June, that would be a good spot. Looking back, we only got to look at 2 OTA practices, which was really 1.5, right? Like that second practice, there's a lot of running in the middle. It's very strange. The offense in any form never went against the defense. So we have 1.5 OTAs, 2 pretty solid minicamp practices. And before we dive into, anything substantial, I think a couple people have been following along would expect us to talk about. What was the most interesting thing you saw? That doesn't have to be important or impactful or interesting to anybody else, but just kind of had your eye.
I thought it was interesting watching Mac Jones finish up the first minicamp practice, spent an extra 45 minutes on the field after the practice had ended. And we've seen him stay after practice quite a bit, of course, but he closed down that first minicamp practice by, he threw probably 100 passes, but it wasn't the passes. It was, let's go through the footwork. It was different types of pocket movement, clearly something that he wanted to work on for an extensive period of time. And then just threw like a nonchalant, casual pass just right over the middle, 15, 20 yards, whatever it was. And then he gets done with that. He worked on some deep to intermediate throws for just a few minutes and then told the staffers that he was working with that he was done, or that they were done. And then he went to the far end zone and started doing more footwork, more pass drops. It was play action stuff. It was, escaping a collapsing pocket, just kind of repeatedly going through more footwork. And then what I thought was really interesting, and I don't remember Brady ever doing this, and I want to put this out there. I'm not saying because Brady never did this and Mac Jones did that, whoa, he's on that trajectory.
Careful, Jeff.
Put him in Ken. No, I don't think I've ever seen Brady take the step of like going through an entire period or maybe the final 2 periods of practice. I mean, the Patriots have scripted the vast majority of their offensive plays before these practices have even started. It's all in the quarterback's wristbands. The coaches have the cards. They know what plays are coming up. And the final 2 rotations of 11 on 11s were a little sloppy. And it looked like, based off of what Jones was doing, he started at about his own 15, 20-yard line, looked at his card on his wrist, went to where he thought the huddle would be, called out the play verbally, and then went to where the line of scrimmage would be, started making the checks, tapping the head, pointing, whatever, going through the cadence, starting vocalizing some checks, and then took a snap, rolled out, whatever, did like a mock throw, and then did it all the way over again. And that was it. And I thought it was just really interesting because we know that when he stays after practice, it's to work on something specific, something that he didn't like that day, or maybe he was planning on doing it anyway. But what very much appeared to be the final 2 periods of practice that didn't go the Patriots offense's way, Mac Jones wanted to go through it again himself.
Yeah, he's a maniac. Let's put it like that. All of that well described and put, and the purpose and the speculation, like he's maniacal about his work, and you've seen that, more evidently, I think, this year, because there's no questions about his standing in the locker room, and he even won over the locker room, of course, very quickly last year. Becomes a starter. Now he's the starter coming in. He's not a rookie. He's the second-year guy. He's telling receivers who are older than him, you need to do more of this. You need to be there. So let's just go into Mac Jones, because I think the other takeaway, aside from the ownership he's taken of the offense, you could see very clearly through these 2 days, his deep ball was excellent. I mean, he had 3 long balls, particularly in the second practice, one to Jonnu Smith, another to Nelson Aguilar, a couple more to Trey Nixon, over the course of 2 days. And the deep ball is exceptionally important because when you look specifically at his year last year, he was almost the epitome of average, which for a rookie quarterback is very good. But the area in which he struggled the most, aside from maybe mobility, was that deep passing game. I mean, he was bottom 5 in the league in terms of catchable pass rate, according to Sports Info Solutions. And that really hit a rough patch when they finished 1-4 down the stretch. So I don't know whether to put a ton of stock, a little bit of stock, or just a couple pennies in here with the deep passing game and the progression we've seen. But if that's real proof of progress, this is huge, not just for Mac, but the offense as a whole.
Yeah, and that's something that the offense needs to start taking advantage of. When as a rookie, his arm strength is what it is. I mean, he doesn't have a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes arm, but that's fine because he's so good at anticipating where the routes are going to be. The first corner route to Trey Nixon on Tuesday, the first minicamp practice, I thought he was actually a little bit late on, but he still made a really good throw, and Trey Nixon made a really good catch. But everything, like you were saying on Wednesday during the second practice, was on the money. I mean, he made those throws really, really accurately, and the decisions were there. And I think that was a continuation of a lot of his throws. We sit here and people can mock us for keeping these passing stats during minicamp. Look, I've done this for years and years and years. A good minicamp quarterback is completing between 70 and 75% of his passes. Mac Jones was at 85%. Those numbers tell me that he had a damn good stretch there. And he's not going to complete 85% of his passes in the regular season. Let's, we can pump the brakes. I think we can
it sounds like Twitter's got a little rent-free space in your head early, which is very easy to go. But look, I'm with you. And I don't have the longevity of the stats and keeping it back as far as you've covered the team. But you even just go to his, accuracy rate. How often was he putting the ball on target? Because you had a couple drops mixed in there. I had him at 90%, and that was within even a smaller sample than you did, just in terms of what are they going against first and second team. 90% accuracy rate is going to get it done. But just to bring it back to the deep ball here for a second, which obviously the rate on that is going to be much lower. In those periods, he was 3 of 4 on those deep balls. And the one that missed was a little bit late read, like you were saying, to Kendrick Bourne in another corner. So maybe he's just got that one route to kind of iron out the wrinkles, but it's a little bit quicker. It's a little bit stronger. I'm just hesitant, like he's not going to get sacked. There are no pads, there are no stakes or consequences, but if we're going to see a year 2 leap, this is going to be the area.
Yeah, and it has to be. And again, I think we've seen the Patriots try to build their offense to be faster. And when you're going to have a faster offense, you're going to want to push the thing down the field. And, the other thing is they did this without 2 of their best, I guess, under coverage types of players, and Hunter Henry and Jacoby Myers. And, Kendrick Bourne missed a day and was kind of limited in the second day back. So he did this by, taking the top off without even having that threat of going underneath as much as you probably would normally see him do when the offense is at full tilt.
Yeah. One thing on this too, because, we can talk about the deep ball and it's obvious you want to have a deep ball. That's a good thing, the ability to score so quickly. I think it speaks also larger to the offense, where you can go back last year and to some degree, even 2019 and Brady's last year here, right? Where I see the Patriots offense, as we're all watching the Celtics, it hit me covering game 3. Their offense for too long has been like a half court operation, where you need everything to go right. And we're going to have these precise cuts, and we're going to have these screens and these split actions and these different movements, a lot like the Warriors move. But of course, you don't have a player who can kind of create late in the shot clock, like these deep threats. They're counting on everything within 10 to 15 yards of the line of scrimmage. The addition of Tyquan Thornton, someone like Nelson Aguilar, if he bounces back, even Devontae Parker, whose best season was in a Patriots-like system, that gives you some more dynamism that they've just been missing flatly since Gronk was here, or prime Edelman, that I think helps you not late in shot clock, but kind of 3rd and 7. Like, Mac is not going to create plays or shots late in the shot clock with his mobility, but if he can throw it deep, that's the way to say, I'll step back to 30 feet and I'll throw it up and hit a 3-pointer or a 3rd down pass, and we'll cover 40 yards like that, as opposed to having to do it over 10 or 8 to 10 plays. Like that's the part where it changes the whole offense, not just, we can score more points. It's we can come back now, or we can score in bunches now, things that they just haven't done for now basically 3 years.
Yeah, and I think he made a throw to Devontae Parker down the field on Tuesday that was like, I mean, we know why they got Devontae Parker, but like, you see him make that throw and Parker make that contested catch down the right sideline, and it's like, that's why they got this guy. You can throw up a 50-50 ball down the sideline, and Parker's going to have a really good chance of coming down with it. Kendrick Bourne, I think, is going to be able to open up some space down the field too, just because he's such a crafty route runner. I think Hunter Henry, we didn't see it because he's dealing with some type of injury this spring, but I think their chemistry, not going to compare it to Gronk, but you can do some things where you push the seam with a guy like Henry. And then look, Jonnu Smith, he had 2 nearly identical catches on long over routes by that sideline this week. And, if you can incorporate some of that, Nelson Aguilar, I think, has had better chemistry with Mac Jones than he had with any of the quarterbacks last offseason. So, you're seeing progress. And obviously not all of this stuff is going to come to fruition at the same time this season. And some of the things that we've seen this spring are kind of going to be a tease, and it'll probably fizzle out when the pads come on, or when the regular season starts up. But, if you start improving on a couple of these areas, that's going to make the offense a lot more dynamic. I'm still, I think Tyquan Thornton is going to be a slower development. I don't think he really showed anything over the past couple of weeks during practice that makes you say, oh my goodness. Now he toasted, I think it was I don't want to say
Brian.
Oh, Brian. Yes. Thank you. I was going to say the wrong corner, so I'm glad you helped me there. And Brian Hoyer, like, badly underthrew him, probably just not used to the speed or whatever, bad throw, whatever it was. That would have been a walk-in 60-yard touchdown. So the speed was evident there. I mean, he had a spot. There was one point on Wednesday when Thornton subbed in, and he had a one-on-one situation with Juwan Williams. And it's like, send him deep. I want to see what this speed looks like right here. And they ended up going with a different type of play. But, I think when they start up training camp, one of the things that you're going to want to see is how they start to incorporate Thornton, because I don't think we saw it over the past couple of weeks.
No. And it's, we'll get into the receivers in a second, but a couple of things on that. I think the deep passing game that I've alluded to and we're discussing now is so fragile, right? Because you look at Aguilar and Parker, 2 of the 3 names I mentioned. Injuries could take those guys out like this, and then they're out of the picture. That removes so much of your deep passing game. If Tyquan Thornton develops slowly, as we both expect right now, particularly after a mini camp where there's no pads, there's no press coverage, he should be able to thrive there as a 6'2", 182-pound receiver, even learning this offense, which we know has been streamlined. And he didn't exactly thrive. Whereas you have Jack Jones defensively has somewhat of a similar opportunity, a little less, veteran depth chart to climb, a little bit, a less of a steep climb, but he's there with the starting defense the whole time. Tyquan Thornton wasn't there with the offense. So he's coming along. But we'll see. Because again, it's very fragile. Like, they need a lot of things to go right for the offense to change as much as we've been discussing. But as far as Mac goes, just to wrap with him, he was the first player that I think anyone was hearing or reporting about. They're very, very happy with Mac, like starting right in the offseason. I mentioned this in the podcast before. You go back to his last press conference of the season after the Buffalo loss, it was almost relief on his face. Like, he was oddly upbeat about, I can finally take over the team now. That's been evident since the end of January. Beyond that, they're happy with him. He's working his ass off. What more do we know just about his last 4 or 5 months?
Well, it came as advertised. I mean, this is a guy who, when I wrote the post-draft feature about him a year ago, somebody was telling me how, he had some people in town to visit. It was a Sunday morning. They're going to go out for breakfast, and they wake up and it's like, where's Mac? And somebody at his apartment was like, well, he's at the facility watching film. He goes at 5:30 every Sunday. And they're like, is he crazy? Like, they're like, no, that's his favorite time to go, because everybody else was out partying the night before, and he was getting ready for a Sunday morning film session by himself when it's quiet. So we knew if he was going to fail in the NFL, it was not going to be for lack of trying, a lack of effort. The guy's work ethic and dedication to the game is through the roof. So in that sense, it comes as advertised. But he was beating the coaches to work a lot of the time, is just, again, so he could get there, watch extra film before workouts or practice, or even the team film session, whatever they had planned for that given day. And it's just he's very easy to work with. He's collaborative. He's not afraid to tell the coaches what he likes. He's not afraid to tell the coaches, hey, it's like, the 2001, I think it was like the 3 Games to Glory or whatever, the Super Bowl DVD that came out. Half of our audience probably doesn't even know.
That would have had to have been a VHS if we're talking 2001.
It might have been a VHS. But you got Bledsoe and Brady on the sideline, and Bledsoe's like, what do you like? All right.
Yes. Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of that scene where Mac is not afraid to tell people, I don't like this play. I don't think this suits, the offensive strengths, or conversely. So this is he's taking ownership, and it's just interesting to see, because I think you're seeing almost as much as the passing accuracy, you're seeing total command of the offense. You're seeing confidence in his throws and his reads. And even if it is a tick late or whatever, you're seeing the anticipation. It's not a whole bunch of checkdowns. It's, whether it's short throws, intermediate throws, or even the deep ball that we've talked a lot about, he knows where he wants to go with the ball, and he's not afraid to make a quick read. There was a stretch, I think it was like Tuesday, when he completed 2 swing passes to a running back to the left on a span of 3 plays. And it was 7-on-7. You can say, oh, well, why are you going with that? He clearly saw something in the coverage that said this running back is going to get a chance to catch the ball in the flat and then gain, 5 to 7 yards, maybe more if he breaks tackle in live action. And, you're just taking the smart play because he knows where he wants to go with it.
And he knows we're keeping passing stats. So that goes down as a completion, just like a dig over the middle of the sideline ball to Devontae Parker, and 15 of 15 to start that day. Am I right?
20 of 20.
20. That's right.
Or an unnamed media member jinxed it.
Yeah, said it out loud. All right, so that does it for Mac. Year 2 leap, as far as we can tell, he is spring loaded to make that jump that we've been talking about for a while. We won't know until late August, September, October. The receivers, though, Trey Nixon, congratulations on your induction to the Patriots Hall of Fame, because these have been 2 of the best practices that we've seen from a receiver, frankly, in a long time. Now, that context doesn't mean a whole lot, because the Patriots receivers have been bad. But the positive here is not so much that this 7th round pick for me at a Central Florida is going to be the star of this breakout player. He's certainly someone to watch come training camp, but I think his emergence signifies a depth at that position, which I've talked about before. It was so fragile last year. Kendrick Bourne misses every practice before the Titans game. Hey, you're going to play anyway on Sunday because we need you. It's just you, Jacoby Myers, and Nelson Aguilar, and that was it. So are you more encouraged as I am about the receiver depth, not only just because of Nixon, who was in for Jacoby Myers, who missed virtually all of practice, plus Devontae Parker and perhaps a rebound, or do you still need to see a whole lot more from this group?
Well, I think 2 things are at play here. Number one, you have a potential number 1 boundary receiver in Parker. And I think that does a lot for the rest of the receivers, because you can do a variety of things with Bourne and Aguilar and Myers. Number 2 with that is, Trey Nixon had a terrific week, but we've seen this before. Bam Childress comes to mind, dating myself once again, during, VHS DVD days. Guys who just come in and have a great spring, and then you put the pads on and it, sort of fizzles out, or, you get the healthier veterans ahead of you, and now all of a sudden your opportunities become limited. Maybe the quarterback doesn't look your way. You have a few quiet practices in a row, and then you get, sent to the scout team, whatever it is. Or, you know what, maybe you're just not as good in pads as you made it look without the pads in the spring. And I'm not saying that's Trey Nixon, but it's happened so often that it's something you just have to keep in the back of your mind. Now, the route running was legit. The speed is legit. The chemistry with Mac Jones is legit. So he's off to a good start. Another thing is that you have to give him credit for. He took advantage of an opportunity without Bourne and Myers in the rotation for a good chunk of minicamp. N'Keal Harry didn't do that. He didn't even come close to doing that. So Trey Nixon jumping in and going above and beyond and taking advantage of an opportunity is something that you really like to see from any player at this time of the year. So he's created a lot of momentum for himself. The other part with that is, all right, you got as a 7th round pick, you don't have the luxury of having a bad August or let's say the final 2 weeks before roster cuts. That happens, you're probably without a job. Maybe you get claimed on the waiver wire and you're out of town, because you've got Parker going to be on the team, Bourne going to be on the team, Aguilar. Unless they find a trade partner, not that they have to go that route or whatever, probably going to be on the team. Jakobi Meyers, probably going to be on the team. Tyquan Thornton, clearly going to be on the team. That's 5 guys right there. So unless there's an injury or unless Trey Nixon has an absurdly productive August, or, they trade one of those top 4 guys, excluding Thornton, it's going to be really hard for Trey Nixon or any underdog receiver to make the team. So that puts them in a tough spot. But again, all the credit in the world to Trey Nixon for having such a good week, that you start to give the coaches something to think about as they get into August, because they have to continue to put him in these situations to see if it can carry over.
Yeah, and I'm glad you trickled that cold water on the whole thing, because I meant to open with the caveat and all the qualifiers and everything that we understand it was just 2 days of minicamp. And as I said before, 2 days of OTAs, which was really just 1.5 practices. So all of that, I think, is baked into this conversation, understood. For people still angry about me joking about Trey Nixon making the Patriots Hall of Fame, I get it. I was there. I saw it. I wrote way too much about it. Let's wrap the receivers with Aguilar and Meyers, because they're very interesting, I think, for 2 different reasons. And I've talked about Aguilar, I think, more than anyone this offseason. I think he's going to bounce back, not in some sort of giant demonstrative 1,000-yard season way. But did you see anything different from him? He's leading the team in targets and team drills on Tuesday. He's active again on Wednesday. He did have a tough drop over the middle from what I remember, and had the ball popped out by Jack Jones in another team period. But I think just the activity itself, even with Bourne out for 1 day and Meyers out for both, is still encouraging for a guy who knows he's kind of got to prove it. He's in the last year of his deal, and you mentioned could be a trade candidate.
I liked the chemistry with Mac Jones, because that was just totally non-existent with both Mac and Cam Newton last year during training camp. I mean, it was almost like it was like they went into every day saying, you're just going to run a whole bunch of deep routes, and you're putting a lot of stress on a rookie quarterback, and then, a veteran who just doesn't have the deep ball in his game as much anymore. And they never really got off the ground. It was hard for them to establish or even continue any momentum on a day-to-day basis, because everything was pushing it down the field. I thought there was a little more versatility to his routes. I mean, there was a play on Wednesday. I feel like it followed up something, but there was it might've been after a deep ball, whatever, a tough break. I don't remember what it was. There was a play Wednesday when he beat Jack Jones over the middle of the field. It might have been right after the fumble.
Yeah.
When he beat Jack Jones over the middle of the field, just a short to intermediate type of crossing route. I think it was an under route, and he had a step, and then he kept running, and it showed the compete level that he had. So this is a guy who is clearly playing with some fire, but it all comes back to the chemistry, because he can be a dangerous player with the ball in his hands. And the Patriots seem to be doing a much better job of finding, that was one of the things that we've kind of heard over the past couple months. They're trying to find a better way to maximize Aguilar's strengths, Jonnu Smith's strengths. And that stuff came to fruition this week.
Yeah, and you know what chemistry is too, and it really just boils down to trust and comfort, right? Like, can I go play with you? Do I know where you're going to be? Are you reliable? And that was a comfort thing because of Mac's deep ball limitations I talked about before. Cam Newton's that you just hit on just wasn't there. It wasn't a great fit, and I think they utilized him honestly in the right way. It's just you have to wait for the quarterback to catch up to you if you're not going to be a player who can break tackles or go over the middle, which Nelson Aguilar sometimes just goes down if he sneezed on hard enough. Like, that's just how it is when he's that light and that fast. But with the way Mac has developed that deep ball and the way they're continuing to deploy him, on those deep overs or digs or goes or posts or whatever they are, that's the right way, because that's how he bounced back in Las Vegas with Derek Carr. They just said, screw the slot. We're sticking you outside. You're going downfield and having one of the highest average depth of targets in the league. Lo and behold, breakout year. Lo and behold, 2-year, $22 million contract that now looks, but good for Nelson Aguilar. Jakobi Meyers, his contract is not even signed right now. He's on a 1-year deal. We talked about this with him on Thursday, just a couple of minutes ago as we record this. It sounds like he's been sitting out due to injury, though he says injury isn't a huge deal. Bottom line is he wants to be in New England. He wants an extension. I believe he's still with Drew Rosenhaus, who, correct me if I'm wrong, if there's number one agent, you want to sign a deal with the Patriots. you could be playing football or not. Call Drew Rosenhaus because of his relationship with Bill Belichick. Is there anything there beyond what I've just alluded to that, you want to watch with Myers, who by all, means in appearances is a guy who they can count on, they want to have here, but of course it's got to be on their terms when it comes to the new contract.
Yeah, I just don't know where they're at in terms of negotiating leverage. What does Myers want to be paid? Where's his floor? We know what his ceiling probably is, but where's his floor? What's he willing to accept? And then on the other side, what are the Patriots willing to pay? It's a really tough time for teams and wide receivers to come together to iron something out. We've seen what wide receiver contracts have done this offseason. They're completely out of control. So I don't know what Myers is looking at and his agent is looking at in terms of, my stats are comparable to this player who just signed for this or in the last year or so. So it's a tough one to forecast. I think right now they're probably still very amicable. And like you said, Rosenhaus has a tremendous relationship with Belichick. So, if there are two people who can come together and kind of figure this out, it's probably them. But, I would expect nothing to really happen here until the end of July, maybe early August, before things really start to ramp up, because that's what the Patriots tend to do with their guys on expiring deals.
Right. And, guys they've wanted to extend in the past, late August. John Jones in 2019, another guy in last year's contract. Shaq Mason happened in 2018, gets that extension. He's obviously gone, but it speaks to, we'll go through camp preseason, see if you get hurt, see if someone gets hurt in another position. We'll just let this play out, which is what Bill does with a lot of different areas. The other thing to keep in mind, just with Jakobi Meyers, if you're at home saying you want to be here, just sign the extension, just do whatever you want. It's not only that the receiver market has exploded. You look at guys like Russell Gage and even Christian Kirk, and everyone's going at the Jaguars like, what the? It's the cap is going to spike significantly in March. The TV revenue is coming in. We're past the pandemic for business purposes for the league. So you could see a jump, not just of 10 to 15 million, what we've seen in the past, but maybe 30, 40. And if you're Jakobi Meyers or you're any receiver about to hit the market, just wait for that jump. Say, we'll go into free agency, use that as some sort of leverage in return, but you might as well squeeze those extra dollars, especially if you're a guy like him in his prime who wants to make more money. Well, fantastic is the only way we could describe your reporting before, Tuesday or Wednesday at minicamp, where you're saying, hey, Matt Patricia is the early favorite. And you know who was calling plays for every 11-on-11 period when it was good on good? Matt Patricia, a little walkie-talkie in his hand. It looked like he was trying to hide it as if he's kind of like someone in the corner, like Secret Service, and their earpiece went out. He was calling plays, and Joe Judge was handling it in 7-on-7s. So I'm frankly a little exhausted by my own approach to this topic, which has just been skepticism. These are two guys coming over to offense who haven't coached it in a very long time, aside from Joe Judge doing receivers. And just, you know what, despite that, let's just wait and see how it plays out, because we don't know a whole lot about the offense, how it's going to work, both the players and the adjustments to the system. We've learned a little bit more about the system. Just, do we have anything more to add now that it seems Matt Patricia, if this was a race, is a little bit ahead of Joe Judge to perhaps call plays, understanding, of course, we have a whole preseason and a whole training camp to go?
I think it's been so collaborative throughout the offseason that, roles hadn't necessarily been defined. And right now, like the Belichick hasn't made this decision that it's going to be Patricia. It's just, that's kind of how it's been feeling down in Foxborough. Like that's probably the direction that it's going to go, just on the amount of responsibility, the workload that he's had. But, they've gone into these practices saying, all right, this is going to be Joe Judge's period. This is going to be Matt Patricia's period. And so it's not like, I was with a lot of you guys just saying like, hey, it looks like it's going to be a run game. Not going to be, but it looks like it's giving off the appearance Patricia's a run game coordinator, Judge is a pass game coordinator. That's not going to be the case. It's just that's how they've sort of divvied it up. And then another thing I mentioned earlier, the majority of these offensive plays have been scripted before practice. So, right. Some of these play calls, it's like you can have just about anybody do it. So there's still a lot to be decided. I think it's clearly going to happen. Like, it's never going to be a situation where Patricia calls the run plays, Judge calls the pass plays. That'd be pretty easy for defenses to figure out by the time the season starts.
Can you imagine the delight on the Jets' face if they suddenly see in the first quarter alternating play callers and go, "We've got him. It's taken 10 years. We finally got him again. Thank you, Matt Patricia and Joe Judge."
Yeah, it's an interesting storyline because it's something we've never seen in Foxborough before. But, I think that's the direction it's heading. And I would expect there to be a whole lot more clarity by everybody in the press box in the preseason opener is going to be, eyeballing the sideline like hawks. He'll probably throw them both in the booth or something like that and just be like, yeah, try to figure it out now.
We'll do it from the medical blue tent, the erected tent. Just go in there, both of you, and we'll have a little people to watch out. Yeah, it's too much because, it's the run game, pass game coordinator thing is another example. And let's get kind of inside baseball here really quickly, and then we'll bounce out and go to defense. The beat is so large and it's so competitive and it's so talented here. And we are fed so little, not complaining, by an organization that, just says we'll keep them in the dark and we'll feed them bleep. And so in that vacuum of it's our job to know and report, we'll talk to some people within the organization, but any little tidbit or idea like a run game, pass game coordinator setup suddenly gains some steam. And then there's some sort of groupthink on occasion to fill the void of what's going on. What do we have an answer? And that's how it kind of gains that momentum. But underneath all of that hot air and talk and discussion is some form of reality. And once you get to it, as you did, it's just, that's not the case. It makes sense, but we have to fill the time with the theories. That was something that looked fair to me, and I think would be smart in terms of divvying up all the responsibility Josh McDaniels had. Joe Judge, your strength is in the passing game. Matt Patricia, you're working with the O-line. But the truth is, as you just said, that's not the case.
Yeah. Basically.
Awesome. All right. I mentioned the streamlined offense. It's comments from players, and certainly not Belichick, have said the terminologies pared down, dumbed down. That seems to be established. The concepts are similar. They're trying to get them to play faster. I think this is wise, considering this is an offense that just built out and out and out and out and out for years with Tom Brady and Josh McDaniels, and then pared down for Cam Newton. Does that interest you more? And you got to pick one here, and then we're going to move on. Or Isaiah Wynn and Trent Brown switching spots at left and right tackle?
Oh boy, that one's a bigger story. I think the topic of with the offensive play call, the offensive terminology is interesting because it's something that I think the fan base has sort of been calling for years, especially toward the end of Brady's tenure here, because it was so hard for outsiders to come in and pick it up, whether they were rookies or free agent additions or trade acquisitions. It was a lot of, Brady and McDaniels had gotten so smart within the system that it was their system. You either had to pick it up or they were going to leave you behind. And right now, this is a good opportunity for them to reset with the coaching changes on the offensive side. Obviously, a younger quarterback. You got some new additions at wide receiver and tight end from a year ago. So it was, hey, rather than, forcing these guys to just memorize a whole bunch of terminology that means absolutely nothing to them, they started to figure out, hey, word association. This word is going to make you think of this route or this play or whatever. And it's going to make a whole lot more sense. It's going to be easier for guys to come in and kind of figure it out and be on the same page. But the whole tackle situation, I think, is a bigger story.
Oh, I needed you to pick one. All right, give me 30 seconds. Do it.
So they went into this offseason knowing that Isaiah Wynn was not going to be there for the voluntary workouts. So they said, this is a good opportunity to move Trent Brown to the left side just to give him a better feel for it. He hasn't done it in a while. Isaiah Wynn, more probable than not, going to miss some time during the regular season. Who knows? Maybe they do set himself up to be a trade piece. It hasn't been decided at this point. But to see it happen 2 days in a row where Wynn was at right tackle tells me that this is among the short on the short list of storylines to watch going into training camp, because he's a guy who I thought struggled last year. I mean, he's got a good reputation around the league, would be a valuable trade piece, but moving him to right tackle mitigates the risk of losing him for a large stretch of the season if Trent Brown stays healthy.
And I can tell you this too. I don't know if I've said this on the pod yet, or in a different interview or different space. They were considering moving Wynn to guard for the sake of a big ticket tackle that they spoke with in free agency and or considered via trade. So the idea of Isaiah Wynn not being their left tackle has kind of percolated in that front office for a long time, be it they don't think his play is up to snuff there, or my theory as far as this Trent Brown going to the left side is, yes, okay, Isaiah Wynn's not going to be here. Trent Brown practiced in OTAs last year at left tackle very briefly and then didn't go back again. Maybe they're just splitting up the 350-pound Mike Onwenu next to the 380-pound Trent Brown and saying, we'll split those because we don't want to be so predictable in third and short, where some of these games are won. And we're going to go behind the right side where defenses will load up. But I'm with you. Top 3, top 5, whatever top. storyline to watch heading into training camp. Okay, defense. We're going to kind of skim through the front seven because, at least in my opinion, we can't speak a whole lot to the defensive line or the linebackers without pads. They were doing pass rush drills. They were often on a far field through, special teams units, so we couldn't really get a good look at it. We'll hit on linebackers in the mailbag, specifically the inside group. To me, the most interesting position far and away is corner. Jalen Mills, Terrence Mitchell, and Jack Jones stuck with the starting group. They were the only corners to do that through 2 days of minicamp. What did we learn, if anything, about them or this kind of position as a whole?
I really like Jack Jones. I mean, he showed me a lot, and of course he's going to get beat. He's going to have some issues. He's a rookie cornerback, but the coaches have seen enough to match him up against some of the Patriots' best receivers, and he held his own. He competes his tail off, forcing a fumble on Aguilar. He had an interception on, I think it was a scout team period, broke up a couple passes, has a playing style that is somewhat reminiscent of JC Jackson, and somebody I think has the ability to really grow and develop and become a good player in this defense. I'm curious to see what happens with Malcolm Butler. I've been told that they are really happy with his offseason, but they've continued to rotate a number of players at cornerback, and we'll see where it all shakes out. So I thought going into minicamp, you were going to see a lot more of Butler as kind of like that number one guy, but we've also seen the Patriots rotate cornerbacks a lot in past off seasons. And I can't remember if I was talking to you or if it was somebody else, but it was like, they would rotate these guys, but you knew that Stephon Gilmore and JC Jackson were going to be their number one and number two. So it didn't matter if they were running with the starters in any given mini camp or training camp. Right now, we don't know. We don't know who is going to be there. John Jones is probably going to be their top slot corner again. Jalen Mills, I think, has done enough over the last year to warrant the being a favorite to be a starting boundary corner, or at least a starting caliber player in that defensive backfield. Where's the next spot going to come from? Is it going to be Mitchell? Is it going to be Jack Jones? Is it going to be Malcolm Butler? I think it's an open competition.
Yeah, and Jack Jones, I think, of the three guys I mentioned, Mills, Mitchell, and Jones, who stuck with that starting defense, is the one where you can say, okay, this is most notable. Because like you said in the past, they rotate a lot of guys. But that's a rookie. It wasn't like we're going to try you out and bounce you back out like they did with Shaun Wade or Joanne Williams. And, Marcus Jones wasn't participating because he had a red non-contact jersey. But I'm with you. He's a guy that had your attention. He's making plays. It doesn't take a whole lot of study just to see this guy is very sticky in man coverage. The one thing about Jack Jones, though, is similar to Tyquan Thornton and Trey Nixon. I want to see him with pads on because he's about $175, and he's an older player, so I don't know how much there's left to kind of fill out that frame. How can he hold up physically? I mean, he fell. He didn't fall. They took him in the 4th round. He's expected to be a 6th and 7th round pick. Part of that was off-field issues, but there's also just a concern about long-term potential. And if they get immediate returns, that's great. That's what they're banking on with this 4th round pick. But you want to see that physicality in real live versus 7-on-7s or 11-on-11s, where you can only take so much. But early returns, given his status within the defense and the plays that he made, very, very positive. Now, negative. For me, this is far and away the most concerning position on the roster. It's not just the weight of the position, which you could argue is the second most important behind quarterback, maybe edge rusher or receiver, but just you're counting on a 4th round rookie as good as he looks. Terrence Mitchell's a journeyman. Jalen Mills was playing out of position last year. Malcolm Butler, welcome back. Thank you for being here. You're on the wrong side of 30 and took last year off. Is there a close second for this?
No, that's totally fair. I think in my opinion, more than finding a particular position to be concerned about, I think it's the defense as a whole. Just because they're younger, there's been some turnover. Matt Judon and Josh Uche, I think, present a fascinating 1-2 combo on the edge. But if they start to test their depth, if they have some injuries, where's the pass rush going to come from? The front seven, I mean, I think the inside linebackers, Bentley is, a popular player in Foxborough, had a really good season last year, but how is this defense going to make enough strides to limit Buffalo and to catch Buffalo? Or is that just completely off the table? So, I mean, I agree with you that there are absolutely some concerns or question marks at minimum at the cornerback position. Safety is a strong suit, but how is this defense as a whole going to be enough to compete for a division championship? I think that is a major, major concern.
And I'll be curious too. We talk about pouring down the offense. Do they try to counterbalance the lack of talent you have clearly at corner with we'll expand schematically. Like we'll probably lean into a little bit more zone like did it over the second half of last season, but we've got to farm out an edge somehow. Can we confuse you a little bit more? Are we going to play different defenses week to week understanding? We just can't line up and play man on man because we didn't have an answer for Stefon Diggs last year when JC Jackson was here and leading the league in interceptions. We sure as hell don't have one right now. And now Tyreek Hill's in the division. The Jets have reloaded up as much as Zach Wilson may or may not be able to get them the ball, but it's tougher. So I'm wondering if Belichick, he's been super hands-on with the offense. Do they get a little bit more creative with the defense saying, I mean, at this point, what do we have to lose? Because right now we're kind of in a losing position anyway, just going down our roster versus everyone else in the division.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thought, and possibly going away from the man coverage where they've been, if not the top, among the top man coverage teams over the last several years. I mean, it's an interesting development because, and I'll back it up a second. I still think that letting JC Jackson go was absolutely the right move. I thought, like you said, Stefon Diggs continuously beating Jackson in their matchups, giving Jackson all that money wasn't necessarily going to get you over the top to beat Buffalo because Diggs has gotten the better of those one-on-one matchups. So it doesn't make cornerback any less concerning without Jackson. Of course, that's going to be an area of concern. Like we've, been beating that drum for the last few minutes, but the idea of disguising it's a good one, but do you have, with the amount of new bodies on defense, are you going to be able to pull that off? It could lead to a very troublesome September, those first 4 weeks when you've got the new personnel. As talented as that personnel in the past has been, they still go through a massive learning curve in September. So what's it going to look like out of the gate?
Yeah, it'll depend a lot on those safeties, right? McCourty, Phillips, Duggar, Jabril Peppers coming in, similar system with the Giants the last couple of years. Jalen Mills, you probably feel comfortable with, but Jack Jones there, some young inside linebackers, like they all have to be, tied to the same string and move in the same area. Otherwise, you're going to have an open hole or blow your own disguise if one person's sticking out. But all right, moving on, two more things. Mailbag and then the top 3 players you want to see in training camp. I have 2 rookies, so I'm going to start with the non-rookie because we might have some overlap here. Ramondre Stevenson is in here for me because we talk about year 2 leap and Mac Jones and how is he going to look and all these different receivers, guys who didn't play last year, Cameron McGrone. Ramondre Stevenson played as a rookie and he was awesome. And I want to see what that guy can do when he was already breaking more tackles and showing more creativity with his running style than Damian Harris. When he gets a full offseason there and his feet are as light as anybody, if he can hold up in pass protection, he was telling us this offseason he worked to be a better third down back. Like, I think that guy might be more talented than their number 1 back. Damian Harris is probably a top 10 running back in the league. And now you might have the best 1-2 punch in the league, depending if Stevenson can stay healthy and is on this kind of upward trajectory that we expect.
I asked somebody not too long ago, who's impressing you this offseason? Ramondre Stevenson was the first name that they mentioned. So yeah, I mean, he could have a fascinating type of breakout year, and their running backs are going to be a strong suit. They have to be. Their ground game has to be really good for a number of reasons. Number one, you want to keep the stress off of the defense. You certainly don't want to get in any shootouts with the way the AFC is kind of stacked right now. So yeah, I mean, Stevenson should be a really fun one to watch, him and Harris. And then, we'll see what happens. Those 2 rookies, I think, have some intrigue to them too. I don't think either one of them did a whole lot. Not that you would expect to see a lot out of a rookie out of a running back at this juncture of the offseason of OTAs and minicamp anyway. But yeah, I'm with you on Stevenson. Was I supposed to give you other names?
Yeah, I can buy you some time if you want. We can be good teammates here. My other 2, like I said, were rookies. Tyquan Thornton, I don't think we have to say any reason why. The dude runs a 4.28. We want to see if he's bulked up. Can he hold up against press coverage? It's not going to be a linear training camp for him. It isn't for anybody. It's going to get ugly at some point. But are the flashes strong enough? Is the power of that small sample strong enough to go, we'll roll the dice because that one catch he's going to get is going to be a 60-yard touchdown, and that'll help us get over the Ravens or the Packers or the Steelers or Dolphins early on. And then Marcus Jones, who I mentioned earlier, wearing the red non-contact jersey. I talked to some people around Houston who said their feedback from the Patriots was he had the most impressive interview they've had in years. And he was a guy who stuck out as a future Patriot anyway. Sure, he's 5'8", and the history of 5'8" corners in the league is not good, but he returns punts. He returns kicks. He plays that slot. He has a ton of experience in man-to-man. what is he going to do? Because he hasn't returned to anything so far this spring. I think he's going to be fully healthy by training camp, and this could be a 5'8" piece of dynamite. I think we through most of the summer.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reason like both Jones rookie cornerbacks. I'll start off with, I'll go back to Isaiah Wynn. I want to see how he looks at right tackle. Just really that storyline altogether, I think is just really interesting if he plays right tackle. If they continue that trend in the training camp, I think it's going to be really interesting because, and conversely, I think the Patriots are going to have a decision to make. If all of a sudden Herron and Trent Brown offer a comparable product to Wynn and Trent Brown, then you have to think to yourself, hey, this is a tradable asset. Every GM and executive I've talked to over the last several months around the league is which offensive lineman's available. Like every single team needs offensive linemen. So, left tackles become sort of a punching bag from the fan base. I understand it when they get beat for a sack, like the heat's on them. And sometimes when the quarterback gets hit in the blind side, it looks ugly and you want to blame somebody for that. Wynn was very up and down last year, but if all of a sudden the Patriots are like, hey, you know what? Herron is a starting caliber tackle. They're willing to roll the dice on the depth just to try to get a future asset or a more immediate asset than potentially losing him a year from now in free agency and getting a comp pick in 24. I think that's somebody who could be had for a Friday pick. So where is the performance there? And again, is there a drop off between the starters and that second wave? I don't know if the Patriots should be overly encouraged or optimistic about Cajuste. Like last year, I thought was kind of like the make or break year for him. And you watch the team a whole lot more closely than I did. The opportunities I saw, I don't think he stuck out too much.
He was like a cracked windshield. Like he wasn't made or broken. It was like someone's still driving because they can at that point. Like he's one of the last guys on the roster. That's not going to hold up long term. Please keep that in the garage. But when he was out there, like it was okay.
Yeah.
He's also a guy, not to interrupt you further, but he's pretty much limited from what we see into left tackle, right? Like I haven't missed many snaps of him at right tackle where Herron is your swing guy. And Herron also got a couple snaps at right guard, which look, this is the time for experimentation, build your depth, as Belichick has said, dismissing every question about Isaiah Wynn. But to me, the right guard snaps don't have so much to do with Herron. Can he play guard? Does that mean Mike Onwenu could play right tackle if Isaiah Wynn is dealt and you feel more comfortable helping Herron on the inside because Onwenu's played right tackle and been successful at it?
Yeah, that's like a really interesting point because it's like, I feel like Onwenu had a tremendous rookie season at right tackle. And it feels like, and again, I kind of stepped away from the team after training camp to handle my newer role. It feels like they're just completely unwilling to play him out there again. And so it's like, what am I missing? Did I think he was better than the coaches did? They certainly know more about it than I do, but like, what are we missing there? And, you also kind of snuck it in there that they were talking to a big name left tackle, and I have my guesses as to who that is. But so that shows, obviously if my guess is correct, it's a very clear talent upgrade and you'd be foolish not to, explore that avenue. But that just shows that they are considering the contingency plan or the future without Isaiah Wynn or even Trent Brown before they brought him back. However, that timeline ended up working out. But then, another one that I'll point out, and this is a guy that I think as media members, we've probably hyped to an absurd extent over the last couple of years is Josh Uche. Kyle Van Noy is gone and Uche has the talent that could get him paid a ton, like life-changing, like generations of families are going to reap the rewards of how much money he could earn on the football field because he's that good of a pass rusher. It's just, he's kind of gotten nicked up. He hasn't had a chance to consistently do it. And, what is his potential, especially across from Judon? Judon's going to get the offense's attention, the blocking attention. How can Uche capitalize off of that? They're going to find ways to get him over the middle of the offensive line too, I think, in some sub formations. So Uche could be a really fun player to watch. If he stays healthy, It'd be nice for him to stay healthy so like all the readers and fan bases can appreciate what we've kind of been seeing and hyping up over the last 2 years.
I said this with Fitzy last week. I can't quit Josh Uche. I will not quit Josh Uche. He is coming for a third-year breakout. He is going to destroy their joint practices with the Raiders and the Panthers. And I had a third-year breakout in high school, and frankly, maybe college too, in a very different sense than academic. And I'll leave it at that. But Josh Uche is coming because you know what? If he doesn't, there's no backups. It seems the cavalry is out to lunch. Like there's Ronnie Perkins is great. The guy took a red shirt. Josh Uche didn't do that. And you've got a bunch of other edge guys. Dietrich Wise, okay, Henry Anderson. It's just. He's got to do it. And I said again to Fitzy, I talked to someone who was like, what are they doing with him? They traded up for that guy. We had him right in that same spot on our board. What is going on? And we could have a longer conversation about the development of those edge guys, Winovich, Ronnie Perkins, Josh Uche. The book's not closed in that. The ink is not dry, but I think they got to do a better job with him. And I'm still confident they'll find a way to get him on the field. And I think that's probably why they didn't address edge more seriously, because they too believe in him and feel some responsibility for him not breaking out, as we were so close to seeing. My bold prediction was 10 sacks last year. I was as close to 10 sacks as Josh Uche was last season.
Well, you mentioned the late bloomer thing. Like he was a late bloomer in high school. He was a late bloomer in college. It basically took him until his junior year of high school to become a starting player, despite being, a pretty good player, despite undersized in high school. And same at Michigan. And I think there was an early injury situation for him at Michigan, but like they also had a ton of talent in their front seven. But, he was a guy that they knew had a ton of potential, and eventually he got there. It was year 3 for him. This isn't blind faith. I think like when we're sitting here in 2020 or 2021, you kind of give like a guy like N'Keal Harry the benefit of the doubt. You say, all right, well, he was a first round pick. They saw something. That was a little more blind faith. Everything that we've seen from Josh Uche has been real. I swear it is.
You're right. I was lower on N'Keal Harry, I think, than most, and very soon. And I don't say that because I feel like it's borne out. It's just, sometimes I could talk about the power of a sample. If it's really bad, or you're playing pickup hoops and someone comes in and scores 10 points in 2 minutes, that dude can hoop, okay? And Josh Uche, in the small sample we've seen, is enough to say he might be able to rush and play, because he's crushed too many. Again, they're training camp practices or their early snaps, but I mean he's there. Just make it work. Your last one real quick, and then we'll get to the mailbag.
I don't really have a last one.
Okay. Yeah, we spend enough time on Wynn and Uche.
Hunter Henry.
He's too big. You know what? Let's do another hype guy, because this will lead into our first mailbag question. Cameron McGrone. He ran with the scout team defense. Maybe it means a whole lot. Maybe it doesn't. But they built a train. They laid out the tracks. They hired a conductor. It was 10 cars long. And all the Patriots defensive staff were in that train all offseason saying, we can't wait to see Cameron McGrone. When we see him, he's not even with the starting defense. So maybe that changes. Maybe it doesn't. But we'll see. He did have a pass breakup in minicamp for what I had. So Cameron McGrone, number 3. All right. First question. How are the linebackers looking? Well, Cameron McGrone with the scout team looks fine. But the guys at the starting unit are Juwan Bentley and Raekwon McMillan. And I think there's kind of a veteran comfort there. McMillan had a good camp last year. And I think, he would have come down from, he kind of peaks and then tears his ACL. Like he's never been strong in coverage, but he always profiled, even going back to college, when Bill Belichick told him, hey, I was watching you at Ohio State, as a Patriots downhill kind of inside linebacker. Beyond Bentley being Bentley and McMillan standing next to him with Mack Wilson taking some snaps, what else did you see from the inside guys, if anything?
No, I think you covered it. I think that's certainly a concern. You're mixing in at minimum one new player who didn't have a sizable role last year. I'm curious what they have in store for Jabril Peppers, because he's still working his way back from last season. Are you going to give him more of an Adrian Phillips type of role? Like, I'm just not sure. I'm just throwing stuff against the wall here. I'm curious how they handle that position. I think they've got some intrigue and sub packages. I'm curious what happens, like who steps up. Maybe it is McMillan, and he got off to a pretty decent start last summer, but like who steps up when they need to stop the run in that second level? Yeah.
That question came from Furio Danucci. Furio is making me smile because I am rewatching The Sopranos, and it is outstanding. He also had another question. Are they doing anything different with Jonnu Smith to make him more involved? I don't think we can say just yet, because Hunter Henry didn't participate in team periods. So the snaps that Jonnu Smith got, to an extent, are Hunter Henry's. He was borrowing them. And you want to see, are they going to go more 12 personnel, maybe as an H-back? I don't think Jonnu Smith is built to be an H-back, frankly. I mean, he is 6'3". It's about the height you would want to top out as a fullback, but he just doesn't have that physicality, like I'm going to kill you coming through the B gap approach. And that's fine. Tennessee used him very creatively, and he had a couple good years there. The Patriots used him in similar ways. I think he's just going to be better, and the involvement is going to be similar. Maybe I missed something. It's totally possible, but I didn't see anything totally different from his usage this spring.
I thought it was as more of a traditional tight end than last year. They tried all these creative ways to get him the ball last year during practice. And you saw some of it during the season, not as much. But it was like, after training camp, we're all sitting there saying they're going to find a million ways to get Jonnu Smith the ball. And he might touch the thing 100 times this season, including, carries or whatever. And obviously that just didn't happen. So what we saw over the last couple of weeks, I think it just looked more like a traditional tight end, but it could be, to your point, he could have just been taking Hunter Henry's role.
Another one on Jack Jones. This has come from @It's Up with a Z. And that makes me think that handle was written in like 1999, though Twitter obviously was not around. What are the chances Jack Jones will start at outside corner this season? Let's give him a percentage. Mine is going to be 33% because the way I see it, Jalen Mills put him in there. And then it comes down to Malcolm Butler, Jack Jones, or Terrence Mitchell on the other side. So one of those three would win that spot.
I would say 40% that he starts. I would say a substantial amount of games, minimum of 6. 100% he starts at least one game.
Wow, I like it. Okay. Last one at Patriots home this has been a rough few months for him. Is there any viable justification? That's a quote for trading Shaq Mason now after free agency and the draft. I have some thoughts, but you're the guest, you're the supervisor. Go ahead.
I still don't really understand it. I mean, I understand making moves to alleviate some cap issues. I don't understand trading a really good veteran offensive lineman. I think they'd be better off if he were on their team right now.
Yeah, it's hard to argue otherwise. I think the trade, of course, is as much about Shaq Mason as what you could get in return from him, and that sounds obvious. It's how trades work. You give something up, you get something back. What they got back was a 5th round pick and some cap relief, and then it goes, okay, what do you do with that extra cap room? And part of it was they were up against the cap at that point, and I think I'm with you. I don't like the move. But I think we've almost swung too far in the other direction where people are calling Shaq Mason the best player in this offense, which congrats. The offense wasn't that good last year. And it's skewed partly because of the great work that the folks at PFF do, where for offensive linemen, that's usually our best and most effective metric. I cite it all the time. However, the way they weigh their metrics are weighted more heavily towards good run blockers because the way they grade pass protection is just you either get a 0 because you did your job or a minus. Like there's not a whole lot of extra points in pass protection, whereas you can get a +2 or a +1.5 or whatever they do for run blocking. So Shaq Mason, very good run blocker. The problem is the value within that position, playing right guard, which people in analytics or film or with teams or in the media will tell you, like you can help a bad guard much better than a tackle or even a center. So you're just not going to get that much in return for even a Shaq Mason who, didn't make a Pro Bowl, very good run blocker at a position like right guard. Now, the choice to take a guard in the first round because you created a hole on your own and then had to fill it, I think is bad process. But Shaq Mason being the best player in that offense and being a run blocking right guard, like they felt that they were dealing from surplus with Mike Onwenu being able to step in right away, and we'll find somebody else. I think what may have surprised them is that they lost Ted Karras in the process, even though, as you reported and I confirmed, they lowered their offer to Ted. That's where the problem with Mason is in the bigger picture. It's not in a vacuum to me. It's more of they didn't take care of business elsewhere along the offensive line, and it became a bigger issue.
Yeah, I mean, that line is going to be even they're going to take on more of a burden than they did last year. Last year they got off to a slow start, but they were really, really good down the stretch, I thought. Although maybe I didn't watch them closely enough to know if they were part of the drop off over the last 5 or 6 games or not. But I mean, when they were winning, they were playing outstanding football. And then you take away 2 of those starters with Mason and Karras. You got Strange in there. Of course, I mean, Onwenu could be, he's going to be good, I think, no matter where he plays. But you lose some of that depth. I mentioned how much teams around the league want offensive line help, but you need to win the game. You need to win games this season by running the ball really well. And your number one priority this year anywhere is making sure that Mac Jones continues to progress and takes sizable steps in the right direction to becoming that franchise quarterback, which I think he's well on his way to doing. If he's not already there, whatever, semantics. But you don't want Mac Jones to take on more of a beating than necessary as he's trying to become a better player.
Yeah. And I think, again, there's some stuff we didn't even touch on at this point. It's kind of old news. I think they probably felt they were selling high, right? Like he had a couple years left in the contract. I think he's 28. He's a better run blocker than pass protector. Like they were willing to extend for Joe Thuney. Joe Thuney's a much better pass protector than Shaq Mason is. Shaq Mason's not a bad pass protector, but that's where the value is in that position. And if they felt like you can get the same amount of production or performance from Mike Onwenu at a much lower cost, which I think they do, considering what they did, then that's the move that they made. So that's about it. I'm happy that we're looking forward, man. The off season's behind us. Like I said, school is out. No more practices, no more press conferences. Bill is really very happy about that. We have a couple more Celtics games. What are you doing for break? You going anywhere far this summer?
We've got a family trip. We've got, I've got a little more work to carry me through the next week or two. I have a feature coming out next week that I can't wait for the world to see. Not really a Patriots story, but I think a human interest story, of course. And then trying to figure out where I'm going to training camp. I mean, I've got to take I'm going to be a stranger to my family. I'm probably going to be taken off for a couple weeks and then come back for the Golf Fights Cancer marathon on August 5th and then take off for probably another week. So it's going to be a good opportunity to get out on the road and meet some people. But yeah, I'm going to be spending the next 2 weeks basically figuring that out. How about you?
I love the idea of a training camp tour. Can we get you a bus? Can we get you a small bus or a van or anything that just says like Jeff is driving by you as you zip through the country from camp to camp?
I definitely need a bus. You know what? I've got an in-law who has a bus. I need to hit him up and then get the artwork and everything. Any artists?
Yeah. We'll just put your best tweets on the side too, just to make people laugh. And it will just be like dick joke after dick joke and videos. And then you'll just have everyone slowing behind you just to read it and watch and hopefully not causing a crash. But if you need a driver, I'll be there so long as the Patriots are somewhere along the way. Well, Jeff, I really appreciate you coming on, the first returning guest to Pat's Interference, 10 episodes in. If you like what you heard, find us on iTunes. I've said this before, anywhere you get your podcasts, hit the review, hit the rating. It does us a lot of good. Next week, 6 bold predictions from 6 different writers. Jeff is not among them. We're not going to see him for a while for reasons he just mentioned. So until then, man, appreciate you.
Of course. Thanks for having me.